What is up, MFers? And holy shit, we did it. Unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable finish to the season. And I didn't really get a chance to talk about it afterwards. Me and Becky and Ozzy and Myra and Cole went out to eat to celebrate. Had a couple beers, had some ribeyes, and I barely even made it back to the house before I had just passed out. The next day, got up, hung out a little bit, ended up going to Disney World with the family. Now we've been back to Nebraska and stuff, and kind of just letting it all sink in a little bit. But we did it. We qualified for the Elite Series next year. I cannot believe that happened. And I wanted to kind of do a recap of this season for you guys because I've been doing all these podcasts the last few weeks telling the story of the season and everything. And I'm like, well, it's my story. And I haven't really told you guys exactly, unless you've watched those podcasts, exactly how I was feeling and kind of share some different thoughts on the season. Do a recap of some of the baits that were absolutely huge, the biggest fish of the year for me that maybe you guys didn't pick up on, and kind of let you guys know some stuff that I learned that I think could help you with any of your fishing, and especially if you're a tournament fisherman. But unbelievable season, and I just want to thank you guys for following along. It was such a great feedback from the fan base throughout the season. I know a ton of you guys were saying you got way more invested in Bassmaster and the stories that took place, not just with me, but with the entire season. It was the first year where they had, you had to fish all 9 of the opens to have a chance to qualify for one of the 9 Elite Series positions. And man, what a crazy year to get. This one was nuts, but to get this one, I can't even believe it's happening. And now it's just been like business stuff the last few weeks with me getting stuff ready for the Elite Series, but definitely going to take some time to soak it in because we made it, man. It's crazy. And yeah, let's just get started with the season going into the very first tournament at Lake Eufaula, Alabama. So we make it down there, and I told Cole this, but and I've talked about it a little bit, but we get down there, we're almost there, and we're all excited. And I pulled up the roster list for the first time of the year. They send out a roster for the tournament. How many boaters, how many co-anglers, and what guys are from what state. And I had already, I didn't know how I would be competitive-wise in this style of tournament because I have never fished an open before. I've never fished a Toyota Series or a Coaster or whatever they want to call them, the Rayovac back in the day for FLW. And so this was my first time diving into this level of tournament. So I get there and we're almost to the lake and I pull up the roster, and not only are we competing against, the other 177 guys that are the EQ anglers, but I figured there'd be, locals to fill the rest of the 230 boat full field. No, there's some locals, but then you see Brandon Palaniuk, Steve Kennedy. I'm trying to think even who else was in it. There's like 10 or 11 Elite Series guys, some of the best in the game, that are on top of these amazing anglers. And immediately, you just start like shitting your pants a little bit. And it was terrifying, but it was exciting. And so really going into that first event, finally, it was the first time I had been able to take the chest cam off, really not spend a lot of time focusing on filming, but actually focusing on, finding these fish and breaking down this fishery behind my screens on side imaging and mapping for a long period of time. And that was the first time I got to do that in so long. So I love doing that and find these fish offshore at Eufaula. And as practice kind of went on, these were fish that were pre-spawn fish on some of these hard channel swings and stuff that they kept dwindling and they kept moving up to spawn more and more. But luckily, a couple of those groups of fish held on. Day one of the tournament, blasted down to them, caught a limit in 6 casts, which was incredible. And we kind of cooled up throughout the day. And a lot of you guys were following on Bass Track, which thank you so much for that. I think that was actually one of the last times that we did Bass Track was that first day, because people were just like losing their minds because I was leading it for a lot of the day because only 20-30% of the guys in the field do Bass Track. I feel like maybe 40%, but we finally get to the weigh-in. We're weighing them in, and I'm in like 19th or 18th place after day one. So great start to the season. Day two, I come out, I get to the first spot, and Gary Klaus is sitting on the spot. He had a better boat number that day. He lets me come in and fish with him and catch a couple there, but we kind of had to wait till later in the day to really coal up. 23 pounds, it was a great day. Mixed it up a little bit, threw the hair jig a little bit along with the 500 DD, and it was badass. We ended up in 5th place for the start of the season. Amazing start to the year, and really with that one, I kind of realized like I do belong here. And that was a huge confidence boost. Obviously, coming into the year very confident with, catching a ton of giant fish this offseason. But to go in there and really start it off with, the shit your pants moment where you see these guys in the Elite Series that are on the roster you're fishing against that you've looked up to for a long time and are literally the best fishermen in the world, to finish ahead of them, to finish in the top 5 in this tough field in a place I had never even fished in that state before. What a great confidence boost that was. So rolled that confidence right into Toledo Bend, another place I had never been before. I fished one day in pre-practice that got cut short by a windstorm that blew in. And man, what a crazy event that obviously was. In practice, I found the shallow points with hard spots on them really quickly, but I didn't think that there was anything giant there, and spent the rest of the time scanning for offshore schools that were post-spawn fish that just flat out, the lake had come up a little bit. They did not want to get out to those real summertime spots just quite yet, but I did find one spot that I kind of clued in because I had kept seeing that there had been running a lot more current on Toledo Bend, but I found one deep spot that was really current related, and so I think those fish were able to get there a lot sooner than they usually would, and I was going to run with that. So, day one of the tournament, get there, go to the deep spot, fish weren't biting, weren't set up yet, and so I was like, this ain't good. So I go up to the shallow stuff and just start railing them. I think the first 3 casts I caught good fish. I caught like a 6, a 3.5, a 5 maybe. My co-angler catches a couple 6-pounders. And then I made the switch that really made a huge difference, and I picked up the big bait for the first time. I had thrown it a few times in practice, but I pick up the big glide, I pick up the line through and fire it out there. Boom, caught like an 8-pounder on it. Next cast, I have fish just all over it. And so I start running that more, cold up to 29 pounds that day, but saw a lot bigger ones. I had a couple 4.5 to 5-pound fish in my bag. So I knew I left some weight out there actually. Day 2 came out, probably caught even more fish on the big bait. It was awesome, 26 pounds or something, just didn't get a giant bite. And then day 3, they challenged us a little bit. Of course the fish did because they have to, but luckily that 6-cents hog wall on the Carolina rig was absolutely huge for me. And ended up going back out deep, picked some up on that C25 deep crankbait, hair jig, and got this guy right here. Won the tournament by a large margin and was just feeling absolutely incredible at that point throughout the season. People saying crazy stuff about me, that like freaking the next big thing in fishing and everything after 2 open tournaments, just 2. And I think it would probably be easy to say that like, oh, he bought into the hype or he got a big head or something during that time of the year, but that was not the case at all. I knew that I just had been really fortunate those first 2 tournaments. Obviously, I was going to do everything I could to keep the train rolling and just go win or get a top 5 every tournament, right? But I knew that wasn't feasible. I just had to stay consistent. We roll into Bugs Island for the 3rd open, and in practice, I realized really quick this was going to be a grind it out, get some points style of event. And really, I got to thank my buddy Chancey Walters because I think it was like the 4th day of practice. I had put some stuff together that I was going to run, but he started telling me, to check out some of these shorter do-nothing pockets with some of these tipped over willow trees in the back of them because he was getting bit on those. And so I started checking some of that stuff, and I think there was bluegill spawning in those areas. Once again, a post-spawn tournament, the fish were still really in a transition period, and they didn't get big on the bluegill spawn. They didn't get big on the offshore stuff. The herring weren't spawning there yet. Kind of a junk fishing tournament. But I focused on a lot of that stuff, plus some offshore stumps that I had found as well. And I was able to flip a little creature bait. I was able to throw a drop shot on the deep stumps. And I just flat out had the mindset, I'm gonna flip as much as possible, catch as many fish as possible, because it didn't really seem to be a rhyme or reason why you would catch that giant 3.5 to 4 pound bite instead of the 1.5 to 2 pound bite that was easy to come by. So we ground up, a ton of bites, 2 limits, and ended up in 63rd place, I believe it was, which didn't sound great after the first 2 events, but it was actually a really, really solid finish that really propelled us into just a great points finish. I didn't do anything, didn't try to swing for the fence with a big bait or anything like that, and I didn't do that all year, really. So going into the 4th event at Wheeler Lake in Alabama, this one was one I really was excited for. I had never been there, just like every fishery on the schedule besides Lake of the Ozarks. But I had never been to Wheeler. I've hardly fished the Tennessee River chain. I fished Chickamauga. I fished Guntersville just for a couple days for both of those places, and fished Kentucky Lake for a couple days too. But I had never fished Wheeler. Got there in practice, and I was expecting there to be a big bait bite, an offshore shell bar type bite, but really what I found was the water was a lot more stained than I predicted it would be. The fish, once again, were not as far along as we thought they would be, to where they were really loading up on those offshore spots. And the bite was a lot tougher. There was a lot, the lake, really the toughest thing was that it fished smaller than anywhere else we had been the entire season, and anywhere else we would go, to where there was the one main channel edge that no matter where you were at on it, within 10 miles, there was gonna be boats camped everywhere. But lucky enough as I got, the last day of practice, I got on Google Earth the night before, found an area that looked like a shell bed that was sticking out of the water, and started there the last day of practice, had some bites, took my hooks off my crankbait, still kept getting some bites. I was like, screw it, I'm starting here in the morning. Well, I pull up and I caught like 20 keepers on that spot, stayed there almost the entire day, and finished, I think, in 11th place after day 1. Great start to the day, 18 pounds. Day 2 ran into some trouble. A couple people started on that spot that had watched me fish there the day before. We're not going to get into all that. I don't want to bring up any drama or stir up any of that. But yeah, I wasn't able to get on it like I wanted to on my spot where I'd caught them. And then I ran like my 10 backup spots after that. Nothing. Luckily, I was able to get on this sneaky little brush pile that I had found. Throw a flick shake over it. Throw a little tiny finesse jig in the brush pile, and got a limit. It sucked. It was one of the most painful days of the year. I think I had 7 pounds, 8 pounds maybe 7. And we finished way down in the, where did I finish that one, Cole? Like 70 something? 60 something? I don't know. It was bad though. It was bleak after the being right outside the top 10 after day 1. So I believe at that point I was still in the top. I think I was in like 6th in points or something like that. Maybe 5th, and we roll it into Eufaula Lake in Oklahoma. Once again, another fishery that's giant, vast, but fished way smaller than we ever could have expected it would have, being over 100,000 acres, but the fish really lived in not very many places on that body of water. And I learned probably the biggest lesson of the year in practice in that tournament that I carried with me the rest of the year, and I will continue to carry with me in these style of events. And that is, day 1 we go out and practice, just kind of fished around, bounced around, and really had a solid limit, 14, 15 pounds. Just fishing stuff that looked good, fishing, high percentage type stuff, not staying in one area too long. Days 2, 3, 4, and 5 of practice, absolutely abysmal. Trying to find new stuff, trying to break down different areas. And I thought I was screwed. I wasn't going to fish in the top 100. There's no way. And lo and behold, the thing I really figured out and the lesson that I learned was it doesn't matter at all what you catch in practice, as long as you find some areas, identify some areas that have keeper bites in them, you can go break them down in the tournament. And generally, you're going to grind out better quality and more fish and make a lot more out of that area than you originally thought. Because I literally didn't know if I could catch a limit. And I went to a place in day one of the tournament where I had practiced, and I caught a 4.5 pounder and my rest of my limit. And then I go to another spot that I hadn't really broken down, but I had caught a 2-pound keeper. I catch a 6-pounder, which is like, it was a unicorn. That was probably the rarest fish that I caught the entire year, one of two. And that really shot me up the leaderboard. Top 10 after day one. And we had 18 pounds again, I think it was. It was good stuff. Day two, I knew that the chances of me repeating that was bleak, and it didn't happen. But we were able to grind out once again more fish to just get our way up to a limit. Jerk bait, caught one on a glide, missed some good fish, broke some key fish off on a shaky head like an idiot. But really only got 5 keepers in the boat that day. And so that was the first time I threw one of the most important baits of the year, which is the 7-inch Divine Shaky Worm on a free rig out in a brush pile. Caught a key 2.5 pounder. Ended up getting up to 9 pounds, I think. When we finished, Cole, 22nd, Cole says. So really a solid finish. Once again, after day one, the chances I knew of me catching 2 fish over 4 pounds were so slim, but it really showed me, don't freak out if you're not catching a bunch of good fish in practice. That's not a good thing. It's obvious, but really you need to understand if you're in an area that's got keepers in it, you can go back in the tournament and you can break that entire area down and pick it apart a lot more, throw finessier style baits, and that's what I did. Catching fish, on a 16th ounce, 32nd ounce shaky head, little tiny Ned rig, suspended fish way up in the column, just crazy stuff that those fish were doing. Once again, in the post spawn, confused, couldn't figure out what they wanted to do yet, and we made it happen. What was the next event, Cole? The St. Law? Yep. So this was a tournament I was so excited for. The St. Lawrence River. Lake was off limits, and so I was excited for it because I love current, I love smallmouth. And I found good fish in practice, and I continued to look for them anyways. Luckily, found probably 10 to 15 productive areas. And so I get out there day one of the tournament, make that long 60-mile run, 65, 70-mile run down within 15 miles of the lake. And I can't catch a damn keeper smallmouth to save my life. And so about, I think, 12:30, I was like, I gotta make a move. So I run on way down towards the lake to a sand flat. Decided I was gonna make the run, which meant I had to get gas. So I get gas. We get down there, and finally, last ditch effort, we start catching some fish on a damn spy bait of all things. Way out of weight from us, throwing a spy bait to them, and we salvaged the day. Only 14 pounds, which is nothing on the St. Lawrence River, but we come in and we're in 128th place or something like that. So the worst finish of a single day that I had the entire year, or up there anyway. And that was a little bit sketchy. At that point, it's like, yeah, I can't finish 120 something and have a shot the rest of the year unless I just kick ass the rest of the way. So that was the first time I think we really dropped out of the Elite Series points, was the first day there. So day two, I mean, I pretty much am just like, I don't have anything else. I'm just going to fish the same stuff and see what happens. And so on the way down, I noticed my engine's not running right. Something's off on that. It turned out the pin for the trim, which happens on Mercury's, was loose, and so my trim was screwed up. So I stopped short and fished some stuff because I didn't know if I could make it down there, and that sucked. Didn't catch any in the first spot, so I was like, screw it. Run all the way down to the sand flat and get there. There's a couple guys on it already, and it's getting a lot of pressure. But eventually, they weren't catching any. They leave and started catching them immediately once the boats left. I think I caught my whole limit there, or most of them. I think I might have caught one more on a Carolina rig on another sand spot. Weird, but worked at it. Finally get up to 17, almost 18 pounds, I think, that second day. And really, that spy bait was huge for me. Just a super unique style bait that I didn't use any of the rest of the year, but those smallmouth, for whatever reason, they eat the shit out of it. And it was my worst finish of a year at 93rd, but it ended up being, one of the most important decisions I made the entire year was going down to that sand flat, because if I didn't go down there, I don't know if I would have caught a limit either day, and I definitely wouldn't have finished in the top 120. So that was another lesson I learned that kind of was the same thing. I already learned it, but you need to have like 6 different game plans, at least, totally different styles of spots, totally different areas to be successful in these multi-day events where the lakes had just been getting beat to shit for 5 days in practice and then a couple days in the tournament, because you never know what's going to hit and what's going to miss. And most of the stuff you probably think is going to be solid is probably going to be a miss. And that really came again to fruition the next tournament. So we're out of the Elite Series points after St. Lawrence River. It would go to what many people thought would be the toughest fishery on the schedule in Watts Bar, and it ended up being the toughest fishery on the schedule. I think most people would agree with that, even the guys that did really well. The fish were, you saw the weights going into it, and it's like, why are these locals only weighing in 7-8 pounds for a limit in their tournaments? Is it a 12-inch length limit? What's going on? No, you get down there and you realize the 15-inch bass there, a lot of them weigh 1.3 pounds because they're skinny as a rail. And so start figuring out in practice, is there something to catching a 1.9 pound fish or a 2 pound fish instead of a 1.4 pound fish? Does it take more skill? Are those fish holding around a different type of bait fish that's going to make them bigger? And I still couldn't tell you the damn answer to that, to be honest. But I did find a handful of creeks where the fish were on bait balls and I could go in there and catch keeper fish, 15-inch fish and not 13 and 14-inch fish, 14 and 3/4-inch fish. So going to the first day of the tournament, and I was confident I could catch a limit, at least in 3 or 4 of the creeks I went to, and I did not. I struggled and struggled, and I lost a couple key fish, a couple keepers that jumped off right in front of me. This was the only tournament of the year where I strictly scoped almost all of my fish. I did catch a couple in a brush pile, but it sucked because I broke a fish off. I broke off my leader. I lost 2 keepers right by the boat, and I go in with 2 keepers that weighed 4 pounds. This was the only day of the year that I didn't catch a limit, and I only caught 2. And really after that day, I thought that my chances of making the Elite Series were pretty much done. I don't even know what I was in after that first day. Probably in the 150s-ish, I would say. Didn't even look, I don't think, because of how bleak it was. But it was day 1 of the tournament. It wasn't how I finished the tournament, so I knew I could make up a lot of ground, even though there wasn't a lot of fish to make up that ground in that lake. So go out day 2, and it starts off the same way, pretty much, catching fish that aren't keepers, catching catfish over and over, and finally get down to a long main lake point. And for whatever reason, Cole was in the boat with me. I didn't pull my cricket up away from the fish that I had casted to, and I left it down there and kept twitching it, and the freaking fish rises up off the bottom and grabs it last second before I reel it up to the boat. Fought it forever, and it's finally a good fish. 4+ pound smallmouth that was just like another one of those unicorn fish for that body of water, kind of like that fish that you follow, that really made up more ground for me than any other fish of the year. So even with that fish, I go catch another keeper, I think on a spinnerbait or something like that. But I go 3 or 4 more hours with nothing, and finally go to the spots where I went the first day. And for whatever reason, there's bass in one creek on those bait balls, and I start hover strolling around, and I finally get a limit and get up to that 11-pound mark, which was huge for there. And I finish in 83rd place. So we probably made up 70 or 80 points from that first day. Once again, looking bleak. I think after that tournament, I was in like 22nd in points. That was the furthest I was out of the Elite Series points all season long. As we went into the next tournament, Lake of the Ozarks, I had kind of been following my buddy Tyler Williams, and he had started way down, and he was making up ground like crazy at the end of the year. And just kind of watching what he was doing allowed me to see, like, even late in the year, you can still make up a lot of points. A lot of guys, say, well, once the EQ guys drop out and there's more locals in it, the field sizes are smaller, it's a lot harder to make up points at the end of the year. Well, just kind of watching what he was doing, I was like, all right, well, it's possible. We just got to do really well at these last two events. And so we go to Lake of the Ozarks, the only place I'd ever been to before on the schedule, as you guys know, but a lot of you guys watch videos there. But I had only fished there in the winter and the early spring, and this was September. Once again, practice is decently tough. Get up there the first day, find some brush pile fish. But it wasn't until I think the fourth day of practice, I get on the glide bait bite up the river. Took forever to figure it out, but it was a pattern I thought I could run. I just so happened to find it late in the afternoon, which I thought might have been a key to when they were actually biting it. But regardless, my plan was to start the tournament on some safer numbers brush pile style type fish, and then run up to the river mid-morning and fish it the rest of the day and see what we can get. So that's what we did. Started off, I think we only caught 2 keepers maybe down on the brush pile stuff, real small keepers, not even 2-pounders. And we blast all the way up the river 40 miles, and it's dead sea up there for like 4 hours. I don't think I even caught my first glide bait fish until 2:30, 3 o'clock. But luckily I had a super long day the first day. And I mean, in the middle there, I'm even just like, I gotta flip some fish up because this glide bait thing ain't happening. I don't know if it's because it's an afternoon thing, or if I just caught a damn glimpse of something that was not really happening in practice, and they were liar fish, but I had so many damn bites on that glide, I was like, I gotta stick with it. Finally, in the afternoon, start getting better bites on it, and I catch a 4.5-pounder, which was a great fish for my limit. And we take 12 pounds of bass, almost 13 pounds back to the scales. And that has us somewhere, I believe, in the 50-something to 60th place. So not where I wanted to be, given that I thought I was on the winning fish or top 5 fish, but not a terrible day either. So second day of the tournament, shorter day. I pretty much had the same game plan, but decided to not spend as much time on those brush pile fish since we didn't have as long of a day in the afternoon. Pretty much the same thing happened. 2 keepers, small keepers in the brush piles, break a couple off and miss fish like an idiot in the brush piles on a drop shot. And we blast all the way up there, and it's the Dead Sea until about 1 o'clock. And so with an hour and a half left in the day, stuck with the glide bait, and I just felt the bite window open for me. Finally get like 4 fish on it, including another 4.5-pounder, almost identical to the first day, catch another 12 pounds. And that got us up to 46th place. So 46th place was a disappointing finish for me, given that I thought I had to top 10 the last 2 events to have a chance to make the Elite Series. But it was great for points. It was, I mean, you finish in the top 20% of the field. That's good anytime. And that has us at 17th in points going into the last event on the Harris chain. And so my mindset of the Harris chain was basically what I told you guys, and that was I got to win this thing or do as good as possible. But I just got to just do the best I can and see where the points shake out after that. So practice, once I got there, you guys just saw this stuff. It was not what I was expecting. The water was more stained everywhere than I thought it would be. And it didn't look like anything I thought it would be like. And I find fish on grass clumps with the chatterbait and the clout. Finally go down to a popka and I find some good fish. But I didn't have a whole lot going into it. I had a shell bed in Harris, and I had some brush and a popka, and I had some different grass areas and the lakes in between in Beauclair and in Eustis, but didn't know what I had. So start the first day in Harris, get a lot more out of a little pod of small fish than I thought I could really. Caught probably 9 or 10 keepers, culled my way up to 9 pounds probably. And then we make the run all the way down to a popka, and we fish one brush pile for like 3 hours and caught a big one on that divine worm, caught fish on a drop shot and more on the divine worm. And then I finally, after I had fished it for a while, I pulled out the glide bait and I caught a 3.5 on a glide and a 7-pounder on a glide. Just absolutely huge fish for me, and blast back up there. After day one, we're in second place. So they had been updating the points the last several tournaments, kind of right in the middle of the tournament with Bass Track. It was kind of real-time points, which you always take with a grain of salt with Bass Track because, like I said, not very many people are doing it. So the guys that are putting their Bass Track weights in, they're going to have a way higher point ranking than they actually will by the time everyone gets in between that person and the leaders. But after the actual weights come in on day one, we are up to the last spot, the 10th place spot in points for the Elite Series, which, because Kenta Kimura, who's already in the Elite Series, is already in the top 10, that had us at the 9th place person that would get into the Elite Series. Looking at the points, we start looking at it, and then next down was Bobby Lane. He was 39 points behind me, but since it was the middle of the tournament, that means I could drop 18 points and he could come up 19 points and I'd still be ahead of him by a point. All these crazy scenarios. Other guys behind me that were in 120th would just have to, have a decent day and get up to 70th and they'd pass me. So I didn't really know what could happen. And went out there the second day, first spot, started the same spot again, thought I could catch a limit or at least catch a couple, sucked, nothing. Move on. We're like, whatever, I'll blast down, do a popka. My blood's starting to boil a little bit at that point, starting to get a little nervous. Get almost to the lock, and there's boats turning around, coming back. They're like, you got to turn around, Ben. Turn around, you're not going to get through. I was like, what the hell are you talking about? Is it broken? Because the lock had not been working great the previous day. They said they had a bunch of fuses go out or something. And they're like, no, there's like 20, 30 boats at the lock up there. You're not going to get through. And this was like probably 10:30. And so I was like, well, that's not good. So I come around the corner to where you can see people, and there's like 17, 18 boats lined up right there. And so that was like a oh shit moment for me, because it was the lock could hold 3 boats, and it was only a 7-minute lock cycle. But you know how that goes is it takes a couple minutes to open and close the gate to let boats in and get them situated in there, and then they finally do it. It's 7 minutes up, and then they open the gate again, get people out, close the gate, 7 minutes back down, and by the time you do a cycle, I mean it's taken 20-ish minutes for up, down, doors open, shut. So we wait, and finally we get in there, luckily, and at that point I knew I had plenty of time to fish because I didn't have to be in until 4:15, but I was really nervous. This many boats now had gone down to a popka. I didn't realize that the first day because the lock had been closed all morning, and so those guys had all turned around. And when I got there, it was open, and so I just went right through. So the second day, I was like, okay, there's this many boats in here. What's it going to be like coming back? Because on the way down, I didn't have shit to lose. I was like, I have 0 pounds. I got to go catch some. But once I get down there and I catch some fish, I'm like, well, even if I have, 4 pounds, what if I have 7 pounds? What if I have 10 pounds? Is that going to be enough? Is that when I need to head back to the lock? Because I might be waiting there for 2 hours. I have no idea. So I get down there finally, 11:30, 12 o'clock, and like the first, I don't even know how many casts in there. I get bit in the brush pile, set the hook right into the brush. The fish just got me wound up, or it blew the bait out and I hooked the branch, or I magically just hooked things that I could not hook on the brush pile the first day over and over and over. Now I'm tying, drop shot leaders with 25-pound fluoro to try to not break fish off, because it was like if I got the drop shot in the brush pile, it was dunk, and then they'd run and just snap and be gone, get stuck in the pile. It was terrible. So I'm just trying to figure out everything I could and keep the wheels on the track, really, because it was getting so frustrating. Finally, I was able to catch a couple fish on the divine worm, on the drop shot in that pile. I think I left the pile, I had 2 fish. I go over to another little pocket where I had some bites, catch some right away on the drop shot, catch one on a jerk bait, catch one hover strolling. Cole got a cool shot of what I thought was an alligator or a carp or something jumping. It turned out it was like a teener-sized bass. It was absolutely freaking giant. I'm sure he'll note that I didn't cast to that fish afterwards. Didn't even make a cast to it because I was like, whatever. I had other fish I was looking at the screen, and I didn't think there was any way it was a bass that jumped because it was so big. But regardless, I decided to leave that spot about 1:30 just to be sure, because it was about 2 hours or so if I made it through without having to wait all the way from where I was to get back to where we launched in Harris. And I figured, if the boat breaks down, if I got to wait for 5 lock cycles, if the lock's broken for a while, whatever, regardless, that can be made up for if I go super early. I knew I had 10, 11 pounds, and I thought that might be enough, or at least give me a chance. So I bolted out of there. So we get done there, and and luckily made it back into the lock. The lock was working, whatever, but you got all these idle zones, you got these run zones, and the whole time, my mind's just going to all these fish I lost throughout the year, these decisions to do this or that, and you get all this time to think. And I did stop and fish 3 or 4 spots on the way back, nothing, of course. And finally get back, weigh my fish, and I was shocked. I was leading the tournament forever until like 5 o'clock probably. I was leading the tournament. I weighed in at 4:30 or so. And finally a couple guys come in. Tyler Lubbett tied me, but I had the tiebreaker with the bigger bag the first day. And 2 guys come in and weigh bigger bags, and I end up in 3rd place, which was just incredible. After catching 20 the first day, and then 11, what did I weigh, 11 something, 12? High, I think it was 11:15, 11:14 or something. That second day, I figured I would be like in the teens in places, but maybe I would hover around 10th place. But to finish 3rd was a shocker to me. Apparently it got way tougher the second day. I didn't think it could get much tougher than it was the first day on weights, as low as they were. But yeah, that second day, it was crazy, super, super tough. So then we sit around and wait, and they finally announced the Elite Series guys. And we snuck all the way. We even made it up a spot to the 9th place in points. So they took down to 10th place because Kenta finished 5th in points. And so we did it. We qualified. That was a lot of talking to get to this guy right here. Holy shit. Unbelievable. To make the Classic and the Elite Series in our first year was, I don't even know what else to say. Just pure craziness. There was many times throughout the year where, you question if it's possible. I never questioned myself or what we were doing, but I mean, every decision we made the whole year was to get as many points as possible. So to see it all finally culminate with that, especially with the group of anglers I did it with, man, these guys are freakishly good. It was unbelievable. And thank you guys again so much for your support and for watching along the way. And so now we got $45,000 in entry fees to pay for the Elite Series. And like I said, I've been doing a lot of business stuff the last few weeks, kind of looking ahead to the season. When the schedule came out in September, I believe it was, maybe August for the Elite Series, I was just like, oh my God, this is like the best schedule I've ever seen, because generally they start in Florida in January and February, and they'll do a couple tournaments down there, which is fine. It's not really my forte because I hadn't been to Florida fishing before until this October. And it's all bed fishing and stuff. And these guys know exactly where they bed, exactly where they stage, and they have all this experience. Well, this year, we're starting right back here. Toledo Bend in February. Going to be a totally different style of bite, but obviously somewhere that I'm familiar with and is 2.5 hours from the house. And then we go to Lake Fork for the next one, 3 hours from the house. 3.5 hours, I guess it is. So starting with 2 tournaments in Texas, and then we got the Classic. After that, we go back to more familiar places like Wheeler Lake once again. It's a little bit later in the year in June, so hopefully the fish will bite a little bit better. We go back to the St. Lawrence River, way up in Waddington we're launching, except the Elites have the lake is not off limits, so we can fish the lake. I assume about 90% of the field's going to be making a 90 to 100 mile run in that one. Can't wait. And a couple other places that I'm looking forward to, definitely. Lake Murray last year was one of the hottest fisheries in the country. Guys blasted them there. And also going to Lake Champlain, a place that should set up well. I love to fish with live scope. You guys know that. And I love to fish for smallmouth. So another beautiful place. Smith Lake's going to be mixed in there. That's going to be a tough one. Never been to Smith. Never fished anything on that chain that's similar to that. But going to be one we're going to have to see what happens in June. And just like I said when I sat right here 12 months ago and announced that I was fishing the Opens, if you guys have a place to stay, if you have a camera boat, whatever, we're not sure what we're going to do quite yet on lodging this year, but please feel free to reach out. We got some camera boats and some places to stay figured out already, but we'd love to have you. Coleslaw would love to have you. And man, we get to do it at the top level this next year against the best fishermen in the world. And it looks like we got in at the right time too, given what's happened on the other side of things. So, God dang, man, I can't believe we actually did it. And it feels very validating for where we were a year ago sitting right here. Always believed in my abilities, of course, but just such an unknown with what would happen at this level and this caliber of fishermen. I didn't even know if I'd be able to get into the Opens. Hadn't really thought that I wouldn't be able to, so I was shocked when I was able to. And then to be able to accomplish the 2 main goals was incredible. So hopefully we can keep the train rolling and many more off-season shenanigans to come, but a lot of preparation for the toughest field and the toughest schedule of my life for next year. If you could, drop a comment below. Let me know what you guys want to see this off-season, what you enjoyed about the tournament season, what you think would be better to do for this next year, whether it be the format of the videos, whether it be if you want me to wear a dress or something on camera. I don't know what the hell you freaks are going to want me to do, but I'd love to hear it all. And maybe not the dress thing. That'd be kind of weird. I don't know where that even came from. Yeah, cool. Anyways, cheers to Meffers. And if it wasn't 10 in the morning right now, I'd probably be drinking a whiskey, not an energy drink, and I'm sick. All right, I'm out of here. Peace. Yay, did I do good?